So I just finished up a 2-month solo motorcycling trip from the south to the north of Vietnam, and today I am going to be sharing with you pretty much everything you need to know if you're planning on doing a trip like this. A lot of you submitted some questions on YouTube and Instagram, so I'm going to be answering all of those today and also kind of throwing in some tips here and there that I think you really need to know. So without further ado, let's dive right in. I would also like to note that I'm currently filming this in Tampa, Florida. It is 8:30 in the morning and it's already 80 degrees and very humid. If you couldn't guess that by now, there's a lot of mosquitoes around me, so I'm probably gonna start sweating halfway through this. I already kind of am. I'm feeling very sticky from the humidity, but we love the outdoors. Okay, I have all my questions here that y'all submitted. I'm gonna start with kind of like the pre-trip questions. The first one being, what made you choose Vietnam of all countries to motorbike across? So this is a funny story. When I was first backpacking through Mexico like 3 or 4 years ago, I met a friend named Tom during my first week, and he was telling me about his trip that he did through Vietnam. He had motorcycled across the country, and at the time, I thought he was insane. I was like, you did what? And I don't know, I guess like a seed was planted that day. I'd never really thought about it much since, but then late last year I was reading a book called Ubuntu. Highly recommend it. It's a memoir about an Australian woman who motorcycled the length of Africa in the 90s. It's epic. So I was reading this book and it really was inspiring me to kind of take on a new challenge that I had never done before, something that was really new and pushed me out of my comfort zone. I was really craving some kind of like new adventure, and so obviously she was motorcycling, so it got me thinking about that. And then I was like, where could I motorcycle? And then the light switch went on and I was like, Vietnam. It was kind of the perfect combination of, it wasn't so off the beaten track that I felt like it was too dangerous to go as a solo female, but it was out of my comfort zone enough that I was like, oh, this would be crazy and a little out there, but still something that I know I could do if I really committed. So that's kind of how it began, and literally like 2 months after I decided to do it, I was on a motorcycle. So it happened kind of fast. What was the longest distance you had ridden before this epic Vietnam motorbike adventure? Oh, so not much. I first rode a motorbike when I was in Bali, like a lot of backpackers, but it was just a scooter. Like it was an automatic scooter, the one that kind of everyone rides around in Bali. So at the time, I think the longest I had ridden on that was maybe an hour, and I had actually ridden it to the embassy in Bali, which was like an hour drive from Canggu where I was staying. It was so insane. I felt like I was gonna crash at any moment. I was so scared. There was like 6 lanes of traffic, tons of trucks and cars and motorcycles, and so yeah, that was kind of my first taste of motorbiking. But obviously I was also doing a lot of riding through the hills in Uluwatu, so I had a little bit of experience, and I did do it for like 2 or 3 weeks, so I felt fairly comfortable, but by no means was I an expert, and I had never ridden a semi-automatic motorcycle before. So the first day that I got into Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City, I went to Style Motorbikes where I would be renting my bike, and they took me to a more calm part of the city and taught me how to ride a semi-automatic, which I will say was pretty easy to learn. Definitely take it seriously, take a lesson if you've never done it, but for a trip like this, you have to have at least a semi-automatic just to get up and over the hills and stuff. An automatic scooter will absolutely not cut it. I found it really easy to learn, and I was doing it on my own within an hour, and obviously it was very intimidating at first, and I was like a bit nervous, but I just find it really helpful to lean on the locals. I would usually like find someone in front of me to follow and just like mimic their movements. So that's kind of what I did until I felt very, very comfortable on the motorcycle, which really didn't take long considering how much I was riding. Okay, I was kind of already talking about this, but how nervous were you to start the trip, and how much confidence do you have now after driving the bike for a while? So I wasn't as nervous as I was expecting. I was more like just so excited, but I will say I did get quite nervous the week before when I was in Japan, just because I don't know, I don't recommend doing this, but I did go on Reddit because I was looking for some tips on, I don't know what it was, something. And I went down the rabbit hole of like foreigners that have gotten in wrecks and died, on motorbike in Vietnam. And yeah, I mean, obviously that's a very real risk. So it was probably good that I read that just to kind of have a little bit of healthy fear in the mix. But yeah, I guess I was pretty intimidated early on, especially riding out of Ho Chi Minh City. That was like the most nerve-wracking day, and it was my first day on the motorcycle by myself. So yeah, the traffic in Ho Chi Chi Minh City and Hanoi, but I was in Ho Chi Minh City. It's crazy. And so I tried to leave really early. Like I think I got on the road at 6 a.m. If you can get out earlier, I definitely recommend that. But yeah, I was riding in traffic for like 2 or 3 hours, and yeah, like six plus lanes and trucks, everything you could possibly imagine. There's really no order once you're on the highway. You're just weaving in and out, driving in between trucks. So I was really kind of thrown into the deep end, but I did very well. I only had one little hiccup where my bike fell over at a stoplight, but was quickly helped back up by some locals. So yeah, that was and oh yeah, how, you know, my confidence grew tremendously throughout the trip. I'd say after week 1, I felt really confident, and that only grew as I continued motorcycling. Obviously, I was always following the laws and not speeding at all, because the cops are really cracking down on people who are speeding. The tickets are crazy high, especially if you're a foreigner, so just keep that in mind. But definitely feel much more experienced in the motorcycle world after this trip. And packing list, a lot of people were asking about what I packed for this trip. I actually am making a separate video that dives into this in depth, so make sure to check that out if it's up. If not, make sure you're subscribed. That will come up after this is published. But yeah, I dive into everything that I bring, but I would say like the most important thing to bring is rain gear. If you've watched my series, you know why. We've got a bit of a windy, rainy start to the day. Okay, so let's dive into the logistics of this trip. This is kind of the bulk of the questions that I received. The first one being, where did you rent your motorbike and how much was it and how did you return it? So I went back and forth between whether I should buy or rent a motorcycle, and a lot of travelers kind of have this debate going in. So I ended up renting it because I wanted to have the added support of the rental company in case something were to happen on the road. Since I was there for 2 months, and I actually was planning to be there for 3, it would have definitely made sense as well financially to buy the motorcycle and then sell it at the end. A lot of people do this through Facebook groups. So I was thinking about doing that, but then once I got to the rental company and they explained like all of the ways that they could support me if I rented it, I decided to do that, because since I was alone, I just wanted that peace of mind, and it really did pay itself forward multiple times, I will say. So I am really happy that I did that, because my bike broke down at one point, and so I was able to call Style Motorbikes. They told me exactly which mechanic to go to, and I went and they got it fixed up within just a few minutes. When I got really sick at the end of my trip, they were able to pick up my motorcycle from the bus and drive it back to their company, because I was in absolutely zero shape to do that. So those are just a few of the ways that I found it very valuable to rent. But yeah, you can also buy it. That's financially makes a lot of sense if you're going to be there for, I would say, like a month and a half or more. But yeah, I rented mine from Style Motorbikes for $315 USD for 2 months. I picked it up in Ho Chi Minh City and dropped it back off in Hanoi. So they have offices in Ho Chi Minh City, Hoi An, and Hanoi. So depending on your route, you can pick it up in one location, drop it off at another. It is so convenient. And when I was in Hoi An, I actually went to the Style Motorbikes office to get a new helmet and to get a tune-up. So that was very convenient. I highly recommend Style Motorbikes. They helped me plan basically my entire route when I first got to Ho Chi Minh City. They sat me down for an entire hour. They mapped everything out. They told me which stops are really great to stop at along the way, when I should take the night bus, and you know, any other questions that I had. They were just amazing. So I definitely recommend them. I do know there's another one called Ticket that a lot of people love, so that's another option. And in terms of like the spending and how much this whole trip cost, I forgot that I had literally tracked a month of spending when I was in Vietnam, and I just found it in my notes. So I'm kind of like, should I make a separate spending video, like how much I spent in a month? If you're interested, comment that down below. Maybe I'll get that filmed and up for you guys before my next trip. Oh my god, I'm actually getting swarmed by mosquitoes right now. I might have to move at some point. Okay, the next question is, how do you pre-plan all your stops and routes? So one of my intentions for this trip going in was I want to be as spontaneous and flexible as possible, because in the past I have really always been kind of a type A planner when it comes to everything, but especially traveling. I would always have like a big Google Doc with exactly what I want to do in each place and how long I want to stay, and I would book my accommodations way in advance. And I just find that sometimes that can be a bit limiting when it comes to certain trips, because if you already have everything pre-planned before you even get there, you don't have room to change and, if you were to meet people or hear about a different destination when you're on the ground, you can't really kind of change things up and do those things. So I've had instances in the past where I'm like, damn it, why did I book that flight or why did I book that accommodation in advance? So on this trip specifically, I really wanted to challenge myself to not book things super far out. So I really, for the most part, booked things maybe a day in advance. Sometimes I would even show up to the accommodation the day of and hope that they had room, which all of them did, which was really great. But the way I kind of pre-planned my route was, like I said before, I sat down with Style Motorbikes and I did, I had certain places on my map and pinned that I knew I wanted to check out, but I didn't have like a specific route planned. The only thing I knew in the beginning was that I needed to get to Hoi An for the Tet, which looking back wasn't like super necessary, but it is what I did. So I sat down with them and they pretty much like mapped me out a route that gave me a good taste of the coast and the more rural, jungly side of Vietnam. There are so many routes that you can take, and I do have an in-depth guide that I created linked down in the description for this trip, and it has a few different routes that you can take depending on how much time you have and what kind of scenery you want to really get into, because with Vietnam you have so many choices. So I pretty much used this map throughout my trip to sort of give me a bit of direction, but as I kind of made my way around the country, I would really plan like my daily routes the night before. And so I would know, okay, it's going to take me roughly 6-7 hours to get to this place. A 200-kilometer ride can really vary in terms of timing based on how much mountain driving there is, if there's traffic, stuff like that. So I kind of always expected to take a little bit longer than what the Google Maps estimated. But yeah, I would really plan things out the night before, and sometimes if I knew, okay, I'm going to get to this place, it's only 150 kilometers away, I'll just book my accommodation just to like take the thinking out of the question the next day. But it was a very kind of spur of the moment type of thing, and I always booked my accommodations. This is another question, but I did always book for the most part on booking.com because they have a really great cancellation policy. I think you can cancel up to like a couple hours before, sometimes even like up to the time of like 8 p.m. I don't know, but I remember just being so flexible. So even if I did have things booked and then I met friends, which did happen, I met some friends on the Ho Chi Minh Road, we ended up changing where we were staying. We were going to ride a little bit further, and we ended up staying at this incredible homestay in a very rural part of the Ho Chi Minh Road. And yeah, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't met those people, if I hadn't allowed myself to be really flexible and spontaneous. So that's kind of like how I went about things. And yeah, I really only booked things in advance when I was going to stay there like longer term. The only thing is like if you are going to be places during, let's say the Tet is like the biggest holiday in Vietnam, you're going to want to book your place in advance. And if you're in a more touristy area, just use your common sense. But for the most part, I had no issues. Okay, how did you choose and find your homestays? So this was a combination of Google Maps. I'd say I took to Google Maps for the most part. Like that was my first step. I would figure out where I was going. I would go into my destination. I'd zoom in and I would just look around, and there are so many homestays in Vietnam, and it'll say homestay blah blah blah, and I would just go in, look at the reviews, and go from there. If I still had some issues, then I would take to booking.com and I would look there. Booking.com and I would say Agoda. Those are two really good platforms. I probably should have used Agoda more than I did because it's more of an Asia-based booking.com. So look at the two of those and compare prices, because sometimes it was cheaper on Agoda. But yeah, that's pretty much what I would do. I would look at the reviews on multiple platforms, and then if it looked good, I'd book it, or I would just show up. A lot of the places in rural areas do not have a booking site, so I would find a lot of homestays on Google Maps and there was nowhere to book, so I would just show up pretty much. And I would sometimes have some backups, like, okay, if this place is full, I'll go here and check it out, but I never had that problem. Okay, the next question, I got so many questions about this, is did you always have Wi-Fi? Concerns with the bike breaking down, having GPS access, etc. So I really didn't have a lot of issues with cellular data. I personally use Airlo for my eSIM. I use it everywhere I travel. They're amazing because they have plans for pretty much every country that you're going to be going to, and you can do everything in the app. So if you run out of data, you can add more in the app, and I just find it to be a lot easier than using a physical SIM card or a local SIM, because you have to go find that physical location. And also a lot of iPhones, like newer iPhones, they don't even have a physical SIM card port anymore, so you have to have an electronic visa. Oh, and with an eSIM, make sure that your phone is unlocked, because you can't get an eSIM if you haven't paid off your phone or if it's still locked. So just call your cell phone carrier and make sure. There's also the local SIM cards are Mobiphone and Viettel. Those are the two like more reliable networks in Vietnam. So if you can't get an eSIM like I did with Airlo, then you can get one once you get on the ground, and there's probably a bunch at the airport that you can find. I pretty much had cellular data the whole time. I'd say there were definitely a few periods on the more rural roads where I did lose service for maybe an hour, and in those situations I just kind of knew going in that I would maybe lose service, so I always had my Google Maps downloaded. Make sure that you do this, because you're more than likely going to be using Google Maps to route your way around the country, and so if you are losing data, you know, in and out of the ride, you just want to make sure that you have that map downloaded offline so you don't have any issues with navigating. But yeah, if my bike were to have broken down and I didn't have cell service, to be honest, I would have just waited on the side of the road for a local and I would have waved them down, because I just knew based on so many different experiences in Vietnam that the locals would help me, and whether they would help to restart my bike. That happened multiple times. So I had 2 different instances where my bike broke down in very inconvenient areas. So I'm officially stranded for the first time, about 40 minutes from my hostel, and locals both times restarted my bike. I don't know, they're all wizards with motorcycles because they have been riding them since they were kids. So half the time, like if I couldn't figure out how to get my bike started, I would find a local and they would do it for me. And if it didn't start, I'm sure they would, like, I don't know, figure it out. Like, they're not the type of people to leave you stranded on the side of the road. So that really was just sort of what I would have done. And then also make sure that you have Google Translate downloaded as well, because if you're in a situation where, you know, you're in a rural town, you don't have a lot of cell service, and you need to be communicating with people, they're not going to be speaking English, especially in the rural areas. So just have that downloaded. One thing I would add about Wi-Fi specifically is that most of like the hotels and stuff that I stayed in did have Wi-Fi, and most of the homestays as well, but only in more trafficked areas. So the more rural you get, the less likely there is to be Wi-Fi. So the further out you get from like any major cities or towns, I would just expect to be off the beaten path and like have everything downloaded and stuff like that. Okay, I love this question because you guys are gonna laugh at me. Did you have to get a license of any kind before riding the bike? All right, this is where I kind of messed up on my trip. So I'm from the US, and technically the international driver's permit issued from the US is invalid in Vietnam. It's a weird stipulation. They were both, I think, issued in different years. It's some technical things that I'm not 100% sure about, but all I do know is technically it's invalid. So whether or not you get an IDP, if you're from the US, you're technically driving illegally in the country. Does this happen all the time? Do people drive motorcycles illegally in Vietnam all the time? Yes. Is it legal to rent a motorcycle without an IDP? Also yes. So pretty much the reason you're gonna need this IDP is if you get pulled over by the cops, which happens pretty often in Vietnam from what I've heard. Luckily, I never had this issue. So I did not have an IDP because I kind of went back and forth about this before leaving. I read a lot of blog posts from other travelers who said, this isn't necessary, it's invalid, there's no reason to get it, just pay the bribes if the cops pull you over, etc. So I was like, okay, I won't get it. It's so easy to get. Like literally the second I got to Vietnam and people started asking me, oh, like, do you have your license, whatever, I was like, oh, I should have gotten it. It's just so easy to get, and I would have loved to have had something to show the police if they were to pull me over. I would just imagine situations where I'd get pulled over, they'd ask for my license, and I just had to be like, I don't have anything, hee hee. So yeah, even if you're an American, I would recommend getting it. It's very easy to get. I think it costs $20. If you do the Ha Giang Loop, you are 100% going to get pulled over by the police. And if you do not have an IDP, the fees to do the loop as a foreigner are going to be astronomical. I'm talking hundreds of US dollars. So yeah, I didn't do the Ha Giang Loop on this trip. If you watched my series, you'd know I had to leave early because I got severe food poisoning, but I will be going back, and when I do, I will be bringing my IDP with me. Did you ever at any point run into issues with fueling access for your bike? So pretty much no. There are always gas stations everywhere when you're riding around, but there are a few places where you do need to be very careful, and Style Motorbikes made sure to tell me, okay, in this area, make sure you're carrying 2 or 3 extra liters of gas when you ride because there's very limited fuel access. And that was mostly on the Ho Chi Minh Road, which is the most isolated road in Vietnam. So on the 3rd day, I did carry 2 liters, or I think it might have been 3 liters of gas with me. I actually, as I was going completely to empty on my gas tank, there was a tiny gas station that I found. And so technically I didn't have to carry the gas with me, but I am still glad that I did for peace of mind. But the other issue that I had with fuel was when I was in Phong Nha, and I did film this, there's a vlog kind of going more into detail about what happened, but I rode the night bus and I put my bike underneath the night bus, which you can do, is 25 bucks. And when I got to Phong Nha, it was 3 in the morning. My bike was completely empty of gas because they do have to empty it for those rides, just for safety. And I had no gas, so I couldn't even ride to my hostel 3 minutes down the road. So I found across the street, there was like a little, I don't know, food stand. There was a guy there and it said gas, just said gas on like a random cardboard sign, very reliable looking. And I had no choice, so I was like, hey, do you have gas? And he came back and had a water bottle of what looked like gas, filled my tank up with it. It was maybe a liter, so not a full tank. And I was on my way, but the next day my bike broke down, and it was because he had cut the gasoline with water and it completely screwed up my bike. So I had to get a mechanic to help it, which he fixed in minutes, of course. But that is something to be careful of. Make sure you're sticking to regular gas stations as much as possible. You are going to be seeing roadside stands as you get more and more rural, but they're just not reliable. So I would just save those for a last resort. I did fill up a different time with those, and it's just more expensive, and you are risking, you know, it being cut with water or something else. So just keep that in mind, but those were really the only issues I had. So the next category we're gonna dive into is safety. So I did do this trip completely by myself, and I will say, just blanket statement, I felt super safe the entire time. Like, I never really had any issues where I felt threatened by the locals. They're very kind, very gentle, and I really only had one bad experience that I'll get into, but yeah, for the most part, in general, that's kind of the reason I chose Vietnam, and I felt comfortable enough to take on this challenge as a solo female traveler, was because I knew that in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia in general, it is generally a pretty safe place to travel. So I kind of knew going in that there wasn't a huge amount of risk involved in terms of safety when it came to like people. But of course, you're motorcycling. There is an inherent risk there. There are so many instances where foreigners get into accidents, get very, very injured. Some people have died. So that is a really, for me going in, that was, I knew the biggest risk was getting in an accident. So I took, you know, my lesson very seriously. I made sure to get a good helmet and just kind of take those precautions. But yeah, I knew that would be kind of the main risk going in. But did you feel safe traveling alone on these backcountry roads? Did you feel safe as a solo woman? So I will say, honestly, like the place, and this is general across the world, I feel safer in more rural areas than I do in cities. In cities, there's just so much going on. There's a bigger chance of your bike getting stolen, of getting in a wreck because of the traffic. And yeah, I just knew in cities, for example, like even the rental company was like, you need to park your motorcycle in a covered parking lot. You need to make sure it's locked. Bikes get stolen all the time in big cities in Vietnam and of course around the world. So once I left the big city and I was riding through more rural areas, I never felt threatened, especially riding through the villages in these backcountry roads. It was the opposite of unsafe. Like, I would ride through and I would just get welcomed by all the locals. They would be running after me and smiling and waving and cheering, and it was just like, I felt like I was in a movie half the time because they were just so wonderful and so welcoming. And so that was really one of my favorite parts of the trip, was riding through these local villages and just feeling so welcomed. It was amazing. And if you watched my Ho Chi Minh Road video, you would know that we did in fact crash a Vietnamese wedding.
And then like a mob of them came down and grabbed me and pulled me on stage.
Literally What just happened? That's just really a good encapsulation of what it was like with the locals in Vietnam. So no, I never felt unsafe at all. I felt so at peace, especially on those really windy, magical jungle roads. I mean, it was just like nothing I've ever experienced. So yeah, I never felt unsafe. The main risk really is getting in an accident. One thing I did also always do when I was planning out my routes the night before is once I had it all ready to go, I would copy the link to the specific route on Google Maps and I would send it to my family and like our family group chat, and I'd just be like, this is what I'm doing tomorrow. If, God forbid, I disappear off the face of the earth, they kind of know which area I was in. Did you have any issues with local law enforcement in regards to driver's license, being a foreigner, riding a bike? So like I said before, I never had any run-ins with the police, luckily. Most motorcyclists that I had talked to had some kind of interaction with the police. I guess got lucky, and I was also really good about following the speed limit, not breaking any laws, stopping at the stoplights. The stoplights are very short in Vietnam, so when it turns yellow, you stop. And so, yeah, I just took the laws like very seriously, and of course, always wearing your helmet. You just don't, as a foreigner, it's so obvious that you're not a local riding around on a bike. Even if you're wearing like a full face helmet, they see your luggage on the back, they're probably gonna see your iPhone sitting there navigating you. You're gonna stick out. So just don't give them a reason to pull you over, and if they do, hopefully you'll have your IDP, and I would just keep a little bit of cash on you, but keep the rest in your bag, because you don't want to, open your wallet, have 3 million dong in there, and then have to give it to them, because that does in fact happen quite often. So yeah, I never had any problems, luckily, but I know when I go back, I will have some interaction with them, because at the Ha Giang Loop, you are 100%, if you're riding it, you're 100% going to have to stop at a checkpoint and basically pay the cops. So this is something when you go to Vietnam, if you're planning to ride Ha Giang by yourself, talk to the locals, especially at your rental company, and just sort of ask them what the situation is, because they know better than anyone what the current situation is like for foreigners on the Ha Giang Loop. It does change pretty often, and I know now, given how many people are going and doing this loop, the cost to ride this loop as a foreigner have gone up hundreds of dollars. So make sure you have your IDP, because it will make sure that cost is quite a little bit lower. But yeah, I'll keep you posted for when I go back. And then a few general things. This is my motorbike guide that I have linked down below. I have a whole section about just general tips for motorcycling through Vietnam. One of them being, make sure you turn off highways on your Google Maps when you're riding through Vietnam. Like before you get on your bike, turn it off in Google Maps, because motorcycles are not allowed to go on highways. They're for cars, trucks, buses only. I did say highways in the past, because you are going to be on some roads that are like 6 lanes and they feel like a highway, but technically they're not in Vietnam. So just turn that off so you never accidentally get routed onto one. But just in general, follow the crowd of motorcycles when you're riding. You're always going to be on the right side of the road. That's where the motorcycles live, unless you have to like do some swerving around things. But yeah, in general, I would just pick someone, follow them, and it always, helped a lot in those situations. But yeah, you do not want to get onto the highways. It would be very scary. Don't avoid toll roads. So motorcycles don't have to pay tolls in Vietnam. So you can just ride right through the tolls. Make sure every morning and maybe every night you're checking the weather. You want to know for the day ahead what the weather looks like. It's so wet. Literally so wet right now. You're going to end up riding through the rain at some point. That happens all the time. But the real thing that I had one time was the wind. The wind was crazy. It was during my first week, and I think it got up to like 35 or 40 miles an hour, and that caused me to, it would literally push me into the other lane sometimes. So you just want to be careful with wind, because that's not fun to ride in at all. Big vehicles always have the right of way, so just be super careful when you hear the honking behind you. You'll start to kind of get really aware and observant when you're riding. Like, you cannot be distracted in any way when you're riding in Vietnam or really anywhere, because there are constant things that are going to be happening in front of you, behind you, next to you, and you just need to be aware. Like, there will be kids like running out into the road, or chickens or dogs or cows or other motorcycles that are riding literally straight towards you on the opposite side of the road than they're supposed to. Happens all the time. And then with trucks and cars, you're gonna have to just get out of their way. Like, they're half the time, they're not gonna swerve out of the way for you. They're gonna expect you to do that. So just keep that in mind. Be super aware at all times. And something I learned pretty early on my trip was make sure that you're stopping for breaks, like I would say every hour. Because if you do more than that, and in that, when I mean break, like it can be 3 to 5 minutes, like just pull over, take a sip of water, catch your breath, and then you can continue on. And it really helps with your overall concentration and exhaustion. I am so tired. It's day 6 of driving for 5 to 7 hours a day. Yeah, my body's feeling it. I think I'm really dehydrated. I've been having a horrible headache since last night. Sitting on that bike all day and riding through whatever you're riding through, it's exhausting. So just make sure that you are taking breaks, you're having snacks, you're stopping at some of the hammock cafes and taking a load off for 10-15 minutes. Just do that, because every time I felt like I couldn't continue and I just wanted to be done, when I would stop for 10-20 minutes, once I got back on the bike, I literally felt like a new person. So just make sure you're taking breaks, because it will lower your chances of getting in an accident tremendously. And yeah, with the hammock cafes, these were like my favorite places ever. When I was riding, it'll say Cafe Vang on the sign, and you'll see like they're everywhere. They're just basically gonna be hammocks. It looks like half the time just someone's house. A lot of times it is. Sometimes they're more established. Almost always they'll have coffee, water, sometimes snacks, and very, very occasionally they'll have food, but for the most part it's just drinks. I loved stopping at those and just like laying in the hammock and chilling out for a second. It was always so nice. And then avoid driving at night. This was like my rule of thumb. I never drove at night if I could help it, because drunk driving is very much a real thing in Vietnam, and also animals, potholes, things that you can't see. It's just very, very unsafe to drive at night. So make sure you avoid that. And for our final category, this is just some fun, like general Vietnam travel questions that I got. The first one being, egg or salted coffee? This is such a hard question. Like I know who asked this. It's Adam. Hi, Adam. My bestie from the Ho Chi Minh Road. He asked this. I was like, I need to answer this, because him and I would have this debate all the time when we were in Vietnam. It's so hard. I would probably say salted coffee for me personally, just because it was consistently so good. You have to get it iced. I mean, you can get it hot, but I always got it iced. Mix it up. Make sure you mix that shit up. It is literally tastes like melted ice cream. It's like perfect salted coffee, sweet cream. Like, it was delicious.
My final salt coffee in Vietnam. So sad. Oh my god. Literally insane.
Egg coffee though, if you get a good egg coffee, it is life-changing. Oh my gosh. I got one in my homestay when I was in Phong Nha. It was like the best one I had my whole trip. And when you go to the north, that's really where they're known in Vietnam for egg coffee, is in the north. So yeah, it's just the most custardy, like thick deliciousness. They like whip the egg yolk, I think, and it kind of sounds gross. It's not, it's so good. But sometimes I would get an egg coffee that I was kind of like, this is not my favorite thing in the world. So like I said, consistently salted coffee was amazing, but when you get a good egg coffee, and get it hot, so it's like very cozy and nice. Love. So somebody else asked, traveling is always filled with high highs and low lows. Can you share with us a moment from each end of the scale that made your trip unforgettable? Okay, so let's start with the high. The first thing that comes to mind is the Ho Chi Minh Road. That was really the trip. It was a 3-day trip where I felt like this is what I came here for. This is the adventure that I was dreaming about when I was reading Ubuntu a few months ago. I really just felt so off the beaten path, and like I was on such a true adventure, and I had never experienced that level of remoteness, especially by myself, and just the spontaneity and the locals that we met, the homestays we stayed in, the food we ate, the people I met. Like I ended up meeting Duncan and Adam on my second day, and we rode together for the next 2 days together, and then I ended up hanging out with them in Ninh Binh, and they became 2 of my really close travel friends, which was amazing. But yeah, like everything about that trip just encapsulated why I love to travel. And even with all the crazy rainstorms and the wind and my bike being weird and all of these things, like it was so unforgettable. I have a section in my notebook now, I think it's 10 or 12 pages, where I just detailed the entire experience. So that trip alone made the entire trip to Vietnam worth it. I had the best time. And then the low, it's pretty obvious at this point, but I contracted very, very, very severe food poisoning in Tasua, which was a very tiny mountain village in rural Vietnam in the north, like northwestern part of Vietnam. And the reason I went there to begin with is because there is just, first of all, the mountain views up there are insane, and they're known for having like this cloud cover that it looks like an ocean of clouds in mountains. So the views are crazy when the conditions are right. And then there is this thing called the Dragon Spine. It looks crazy if you look it up on Google Maps. The pictures are epic, and you can hike it, you can even motorcycle it. I love to hike, so I was just really excited to take this little side quest, do some cool hikes on this epic mountain area, and then continue on my way up north. Yeah, that did not occur. I got there, and literally the first night that I was there, I came down with the worst food poisoning of my life. Like, I thought I was dying.
I don't know what I have, but it's horrible.
At first I thought I had a parasite, because I've had parasites before in Mexico, but this was nothing compared to the parasite. And so, you know, many days later, lots of suffering and having to figure out how to get down the mountain, how to get to Hanoi to the hospital. I had a really bad experience at the hospital in this very rural town, and that was really the only like bad experience I had with locals. And I don't blame them. Like, it was a tough situation to be like a solo foreigner. If something were to have happened, I don't know, I think they were worried about if something were to happen. Again, I'm not totally sure, but I don't blame them. It was a really rough situation. But the number one mistake I made on this trip was not bringing food poisoning medication. This was such a blunder on my end, because literally on like most other trips I go on, I always have an emergency stash of ciprofloxacin. It's an food poisoning medication that I got in Mexico when I got really, really sick with a bacterial infection, and it basically just like wipes your gut. I touch more on this in my packing video, but I did just want to note that in here. Definitely consult with your doctor and bring some kind of emergency food poisoning medication so you don't get caught in a situation like I did in a very rural area. Eventually I got to Hanoi. I got really, really good medical treatment at the Vinmec International Hospital. I highly recommend going there if you need good medical care in Vietnam. And yeah, they basically told me that I either had salmonella or E. coli. Once I got to the hospital, it was a week later, because it took me forever to get to Hanoi. I had fought off whatever was in me. So they were going off basically my symptoms, but to a T, everything that they said, did you have this, did you have that, did you have that, like so specific. I was like, yes, yes, yes. They were like, yeah, you had severe food poisoning, probably salmonella or E. coli. So something I ate, I was eating a lot of things on the side of the road that were questionable. So yeah, it was probably one of those meals that got me, but it really could have been anything. Like, you can get salmonella at a nice restaurant in the US, so you know, who's to say. But that was by far the most difficult experience I've ever had traveling, not just in Vietnam, but just it was so rough. But I also really am kind of glad that I went through that situation. I wouldn't change a thing, because I learned so much, and I also now know that no matter what happens when I'm traveling, I can get myself out of bad situations. I really have a lot of trust with myself now, because there was nobody there to help me. I really had to just figure it out by myself.
I think I'm just in like full survival mode right now, because I have absolutely nobody to rely on in this moment but myself.
It was miserable, but I got through it, and I did end up deciding to leave a week later just because I was so weak. My immune system was still really shot. I was just so homesick and emotionally drained, and it was just not a good time for me to continue making my way through the north, some of the hardest riding in Vietnam. So yeah, that's gonna be a trip I do in the future when I'm feeling better, and I've made a full recovery, thank the Lord. Like, I feel amazing now. So somebody else asked, were there any places you wished you could have stayed longer? Best places and why? So I will say Hoi An. I fell in love with Hoi An. I was only supposed to be there for a week and a half. I was there for 3 weeks. I kept extending because it was just such a wonderful place to relax and just let my nervous system chill out after a few weeks of really, really crazy back-to-back travel through Japan, and then my first week motorcycling through Vietnam. So yeah, I loved Hoi An. I could have easily stayed there for a few months. It really has like everything you could want, at least for me, in a town. They had had such a wonderful beach town area that I was not expecting. Like, the beaches are gorgeous and the whole area around the beach is so cute. So I loved staying over there. But of course you have Old Town, which, yes, very, very touristy, but so beautiful, so vibrant. There's just so much food and culture and just a lot to experience in Hoi An. And then of course the rice paddies in Hoi An are so beautiful. And my favorite thing was just walking or riding my bike through the rice fields, going to the different cafes that were all around and just enjoying myself. Like, it was beautiful. So I really loved it there. I'd love to go back for longer. It's a great spot for digital nomads, a great community there. So yeah, I loved Hoi An. I will say another place I loved that blew me away was Mai Chau. So Mai Chau was the place I went to right before Ta Sua. So it was kind of like my last hurrah in Vietnam. I didn't know it at the time, but I had so much fun there. It is so beautiful. It's pretty rural. It's close to Ninh Binh. So I think I got there in maybe 4 or 5 hours on my motorcycle from Ninh Binh, and it's just this gorgeous valley, so many rice fields, rice terraces, lots of little rural mountain villages if you ride through the mountains, and the actual town of Mai Chau itself, it's home to a lot of different ethnic groups. So there was a lot of Thai immigrants that came to Vietnam years and years ago and set up these villages in this area, and so you get a really unique look at those ethnic groups in this area. And so I just loved walking through those villages and interacting with the locals and seeing the hand-woven scarves and textiles and the food and just locals going about their daily life. I really enjoyed that area. I could have stayed there probably a couple extra days. The nature there is just amazing. I found these epic hot springs, tons of waterfalls. I mean, it was just so much fun. So yeah, that is a place I could have definitely stayed longer, and you have to go if you're in Vietnam. And then of course I never really made it through the north, so when I go back I really want to go to Sapa. There was a homestay that I found. It was like Homestay Orange something that I really wanted to check out. It was in one of the little towns surrounding Sapa, so I really wanted to go there. I was excited to kind of live with some locals and have like a great homestay experience again. I was planning to hike Mount Fansipan. I sound so American saying that. That was literally horrible coming out of my mouth. But I did want to hike that because it is the roof of Indochina, so it is the highest peak in the Indochina area. So I would have loved to hike that. And then of course the Ha Giang Loop, that is just a must-do in Vietnam. It's gotten really touristy over the years, but I was really excited. I found some kind of off the beaten track routes that I could have taken that took me right to the border of China. It's such a cool area. So when I go back, I want to take my time on the Ha Giang Loop and do it in maybe 5 days instead of 3. And then I wanted to go down after that and do the Cao Bang Loop. So the Cao Bang Loop is another incredible loop. It's less traffic than the Ha Giang, but it's pretty close. So that would have been kind of what I did if I had stayed, but it's a lot of mountain riding. It's not easy, and I'm really happy I didn't stay because when I got back to the US after 30 hours of traveling, I got sick again. So I was like throwing up. It like felt the same. It was so rough. So my gut and my immune system really needed to rest. But yeah, when I go back, I will be ready to hit it, and I'm so excited. So yeah, that's definitely going to happen at some point, but there are so many spots in Vietnam that I didn't get to go to that I'd love to. I mean, it's just such an epic country. To all the Vietnamese watching, thank you so much for welcoming me into your country, and just you should be so proud of where you live. It's so wonderful, and I hope that all of you get to travel and see as much of your amazing country as possible. I feel very, very privileged to have been able to do this trip and see so much of your amazing country. So yeah, I'll be back for sure. One person, actually several people have asked, what is on your mind for your next project? What's the next adventure? This is very much a big departure from this trip. I swear this year is like my year of trying new things, and so in less than 3 weeks, I will be getting on the Colorado Trail. And the Colorado Trail is a 486-mile trail, and I will be through hiking this trail over the course of 5 to 6 weeks. So I will be carrying everything that I need to live: tent, sleeping bag, food, water, everything on my back in a backpack, hiking 14 plus miles a day and sleeping in the woods, and doing this for 5 to 6 weeks until I reach Durango. So it starts in Denver, ends in Durango, and that's what I'm going to be doing for a month and a half. I am going with my sister and 2 of my cousins, so we're planning to do this together, which is going to be so much fun. And of course, I will be filming the whole thing for YouTube. I will be creating one big epic film about the entire experience, and I'm so excited. I mean, I'm a bit nervous, and obviously, like, coming back to the US from Vietnam, my fitness level, my health was at an absolute 0. Like, I really had to come back from nothing to get ready physically for this trip. And so it's been about 2 months since I've gotten back, and I feel really, really good. I feel very strong. I did a lot of hiking up in North Carolina, and I'm about to go back up again to do some more training. But yeah, just feeling so grateful for my health in this moment, because I really came back with nothing. And yeah, I'm about to get on this trail and live in nature for a month and a half, and yeah, it's gonna be like nothing I've ever done before. So we're all doing this for the first time, and I'm excited to bring you guys along on the real, like, honest experience of what this is like. So make sure you're subscribed to my channel. It really supports me, and I just appreciate you watching to the end if you're here. If you want to give this video a like, I would also very much appreciate that. But thank you so much for supporting me on this journey through Vietnam. For those of you that have been here from the beginning, I see you, I've seen your comments, they are all mean so much to me, and I'm just excited to take on this new challenge and yeah, make it back to Vietnam one day. I am 100% going to do that, because it was such an incredible trip, and I encourage all of you who are thinking about traveling solo or doing a new adventure, even if it's very small, just know that we all started somewhere. We all started from nothing at one point. We're all beginners, and the me 3-4 years ago, even a year ago, I would have never thought that I could do something like this, truly. So it just goes to show that the more that you slowly push yourself out of your comfort zone, you have no idea what you are capable of. So yeah, just have faith in yourself and take things one baby step at a time, and you have no idea what you might be doing a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. If you want me to do a spending video, comment down below, and I'll try and get that up before I hit the trail. I'm trying to get so many videos edited and uploaded and scheduled out before I leave on the trail, because like, I'm gonna have very limited cell service, and I'm obviously not bringing my laptop. So yeah, we will see what content I'm able to get out while I'm out there. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed these videos, and yeah, next time I see you guys, I'll be on the trail. Bye.